One of the symbolic weapon systems of the First Cold War was the ZSU-23-4 Shilka. This self-propelled anti-aircraft gun, shortly SPAAG, had posed a great threat to the air units of Western armies for many years. The ZSU-23-4 had changed aircraft designs and air support tactics in NATO, although it may become obsolete today. Now, we're investigating the legendary Shilka, who played an important role in transforming modern armies into their present form. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel before we start, and give us a thumbs up if you like our video. To be notified of our new video, please click the bell button. Indeed, the ZSU-23-4 is one of the key systems in shaping modern armies. It is possible to see its traces in the assault helicopters designed since the late 1970s, the spread of long-range anti-tank missiles, and the birth of another important legend such as the A-10. Before continuing to investigate the ZSU-23-4, it would be helpful at this point to take a brief look at the development of the SPAAGs. Interestingly, the first examples of anti-aircraft guns were self-propelled. For example, the French Canon de 75mm anti-airlian Model 1913, the British 76.2 QF 13-pounder Mark IV, and the German 7.7 cm leichte Kraftwagengeschütze M1914, widely used during the First World War, were the track-mounted air defense systems. During the Second World War, the use of towed anti-aircraft guns for area air defense became more common. Nevertheless, the mechanized units of both sides generally continued to use the anti-aircraft guns mounted on armored vehicles and tank hulls. The systems such as the ZSU-57-2 and M42 Duster, designed at the beginning of the First Cold War, didn't have very different design criteria than the examples in the Second World War. The ZSU-57-2, the predecessor of the ZSU-23-4, had two 57mm autocannons which were aimed optically inside the manually operated turret. Naturally, the effectiveness of this SPAAG against jet fighters was low. So, to overcome this problem, in 1957, the Soviet Army initiated studies on new concept SPAAG, which would provide air defense to the mechanized infantry and armored units. In 1960, the Soviet Army started the trials of two prototypes, one with 23mm quadruple gun called ZSU-23-4 Shilka, and the other with 37mm twin-barrel gun called ZSU-37-2 Yenisei. Both SPAGs had fire control radar and computers, which were considered as the state of art in that time. They were able to follow the tanks on the field and fire accurately on the move. After a year of extensive trials, the Soviet Army chose the ZSU-23-4. Actually, the trials showed that the ZSU-37-2 was more successful than its rival in terms of firepower. Naturally, 37mm gun had a longer effective range and a higher effective altitude. But the Shilka had also its own advantages. First of all, the ZSU-23-4 was nearly twice as effective against its rival in terms of firing efficiency at high-speed targets at altitudes of 200 to 500 meters. And it was lighter. The steel hull of the ZSU-23-4 is based on the ASU-85 tracked assault gun. The SPAAG has a suitable size and weight for transporting by the AN-12 or IL-76 cargo aircraft. The crew compartment and the weapon are separated from each other with an airtight armored bulkhead. Reload hatches of the 23mm guns are outside. The early models of the ZSU-23-4 had a deficient barrel cooling system and could occasionally have a cook-off problem. The gun was getting too hot after the prolonged fire. In some cases, even if the gunner was not pulling the trigger, the heat could cause firing the ammunition inside the chamber spontaneously. Once the first round was fired, the mechanism was not stopping. Also, the overheating problem could cause jamming. At first, the gunners solved these problems by waiting some time for cooling the barrels after every 15 rounds burst. Later, by the ZSU-23-4 model, the SPAAG has been fitted with an improved barrel cooling system. The gunner can choose using the barrels in singles, twos, and fours. The Shilka has the options of 3, 5, 10, or 30 round salvo from each barrel. The J-band RPK-2 radar of the ZSU-23-4 has the capability of both detection and tracking. The NATO reporting name of this radar is Gundish. The RPK-2 can detect a target from a range of 20,000 meters and track it from a range of 18,000 meters. In case of an electronic jamming or an approaching anti-radar missile, the radar closes itself automatically and the gunner switches to the optical sight. It can engage the target on the move and even from a side slope of 10 degrees. However, according to many combat reports, it has been observed that the ZSU-23-4 loses its firing effectiveness by half while it's on the move. The vehicle has a 4-person crew consisting of a commander, driver, gunner, and radar operator. It is 6.54 meters long, 3.13 meters wide, and 2.58 meters high. When the radar is elevated, the total height increases to 3.57 meters. The combat weight of the Shilka is 20,500 kilograms. The 280 horsepower V6R diesel engine provides a maximum speed of 50 kilometers per hour. The range is 450 kilometers. It can negotiate 1.1 meter vertical steps and 2.8 meter trenches. The fording depth of the vehicle is 1.07 meter. Four 23mm AZMP-23M guns of the ZSU-23-4 have a 970 meters per second muzzle velocity, the effective altitude of 2,500 meters, and the effective range of 2,500 meters. The theoretical rate of fire is between 800 and 1,000 rounds per minute for each barrel. The guns can elevate between -4 to 85 degrees. The turning speed of the turret is 60 degrees per second. So, why was such an advanced SPAAG developed in the USSR and not in the West? With Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Nazi Germany succeeded in destroying many Soviet aircrafts on the ground. For the Red Army, it wasn't possible to wait for gaining air superiority to fight against the Wehrmacht. Therefore, the anti-aircraft guns became the most important card of the USSR against the Luftwaffe. However, the situation was different on the Western Front. The US and British ground troops had gained air superiority before they set foot on continental Europe. When they landed in France in 1944, the Luftwaffe was not the primary threat to them. Western allies enjoyed having a great air power which would save them in their most critical moments for many times. This is why the USSR chose to rely on a concept that considered the possibility of losing its aircraft in the first hours of a possible Third World War. In such a scenario, the SPAAGs were vital. NATO, on the other hand, did not consider going a war where it didn't have the air superiority. During the First Cold War years, each motorized infantry and armored regiments of the Soviet Army had 4 Shilkas as well as 4 low-altitude infrared-guided surface-to-air missile systems. Typically, the regiment was positioning its ZSU-23 force near the forward edge of the battle area behind the main forces. In defensive operations, the SPAAGs were being located generally between 600 to 1,000 meters behind the leading tanks. In an offensive operation, this distance reduced between 400 to 600 meters. On the march, the Soviet Army was dividing the ZSU-23 force evenly along with the troop columns. Of course, depending on the specific conditions of the combat environment or the doctrines of the different user countries, ZSU-23 force could also be used in different formations. For example, the National People's Army of East Germany was operating its ZSU-23 force in pairs about 200 to 300 meters behind the combat vehicles. The distance between the pairs was up to 2,000 meters. At first, the Soviet Army had autonomously operated each ZSU-23-4 independent from regimental or divisional air defense. But in a short time, it was realized that this formation was reducing efficiency. In 1978, the Soviet Army added the PPRU-1 reconnaissance and control post vehicles to motor rifle or tank regimental air defense units. This vehicle, whose NATO reporting name is Dog Ear, has a detection radar with a range of 40,000 meters and automatic fire control system associated with the divisional air defense system. The ZSU-23-4 was not a lone wolf, but a good team player. Each Soviet divisions had also two other important systems: the 2K-11 Krug, whose NATO reporting name is SA-4 Ganev, and the 2K-12 Cub, whose NATO reporting name is SA-6 Gainful. To avoid these systems, which were effective at high and medium altitude, the NATO aircraft had to fly below the radar line of sight at low altitude. This was where the ZSU-23-4 came into play. However, the SPAAG was not alone in this task. The Regimental Air Defense Unit had also four 9K-31 Strela 1s, whose NATO reporting name is SA-9 Gaskin, or four 9K-35 Strela 10s, whose NATO reporting name is SA-13 Gopher. It was also necessary to take into account the presence of at least one man-pads in every armored vehicle. Within this deadly team, the ZSU-23-4 was doing its part properly. During the 1973 Yom Kippur War, both Egypt and Syria used the ZSU-23-4s extensively and successfully. In the early stages of the war, the Israeli Air Force couldn't operate its aircraft effectively at the high altitude because of the Soviet-made air defense missile umbrella. When the aircraft downed the low altitude, the deadly ZSU-23-4 was waiting for them. Many sources claim that these SPAAGs were responsible 30% of the Israeli aircraft lost. But as we mentioned before, the ZSU-23-4 was only a good team player. During the war, Egypt alone had launched air defense missiles more than the total amount of all NATO's stock in Europe. The Shilka wouldn't have achieved such success without the horror at high and medium altitudes by the missiles. As a matter of fact, after the Egyptian S-75 batteries, whose NATO reporting name was SA-2 Guideline, were destroyed from the ground, the Israeli Air Force began to operate successfully on the front and not afraid of the ZSU-23-4s. It was this battle that was the peak of the Soviet air defense team's success. Then the decline started. Thanks to the tactics and electronic warfare systems developed with the experience gained here, neither Israel nor other Western countries have ever experienced a similar nightmare. 9 years later, in Lebanon, during Operation Mole Crooked 19, Israeli Air Force managed to destroy the entire Syrian air defense and only lost one unmanned aerial vehicle. In later conflicts, the ZSU-23-4 was used more against land threats rather than air. In Afghanistan, the Shilka, with its high barrel elevation angle, took on important tasks in protecting the convoys against the Mujahideen ambushing in the high ground. Four 23mm guns with rapid firing capability had a lethal effect. Similarly, after the Soviet Union collapsed, the Russians used the ZSU-23-4s extensively against Chechens who had ambushed the steep mountains of the Caucasus. In conflicts in many other parts of the world, the Shilka continues to prove itself as a fire support vehicle. For example, both groups fighting in Syria today use the ZSU-23-4s intensively in urban areas. It was its success that brought the end of the ZSU-23-4. Since the late 1970s, 23mm resistant rotors have become the main design criteria for the military helicopter. The USA developed the AGM-114 Hellfire missile, which has a longer range than the Shilka's guns. The king of the close air support mission, the A-10, was the direct answer for it. The measures developed against it were so effective that even the USSR developed the Tu-6 Tunguska in the 1980s to replace the Shilka. But many users of the ZSU-23-4s continue to rely on them with some modernization programs. Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine have mounted the Igla missiles on the Shilkas. The Polish ZSU-23-4 MP Biała has Grom missiles. India has equipped its Shilkas with active electronically scanned array radar. Despite all these improvements, the ZSU-23-4 has long been an obsolete system. It was once a nightmare for aircraft. Yet, those days are over. Still, it is possible to see Shilka in the inventory of many countries today. Its success in the 1970s shaped today's armies. And that's why the ZSU-23-4 deserves to be remembered as a true legend. Thanks for watching our video. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up if you like our video. To be notified of our new video, please click the bell button.